The midday sun beat down mercilessly as Sarah Wilson navigated her weathered pickup truck along the gravel back roads of Millfield County. Tall weeds and abandoned tractors dotted the landscape of what had once been thriving farmland, now mostly surrendered to corporate agriculture and economic hardship. This forgotten stretch of rural America hadn't seen prosperity since before the 2008 recession. A stack of papers lay on the passenger seat, foreclosure warnings from First Millfield Bank on one side, inheritance documents from an attorney on the other. The juxtaposition wasn't lost on Sarah. One pile threatening to take away her family's land, the other offering an unexpected property she never wanted. At 33, with her father 5 years in the grave and her mother moved to Arizona for her health, Sarah hadn't planned on inheriting a junkyard while simultaneously fighting to keep her own farm afloat. "Mom, are we almost there?" Lily's voice piped up from the back seat. At 10 years old, Sarah's daughter had inherited her grandfather's curiosity and her mother's stubborn determination. Her sandy blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, a smudge of dirt already on her freckled cheek despite the early hour. "Another few minutes, honey. Remember what I told you about Uncle Jack?" Lily nodded, clutching her backpack filled with books, colored pencils, and a peanut butter sandwich. He and Grandpa had a big fight about land a long time ago, and they stopped talking to each other. And now he died and left us his junkyard. Sarah winced at her daughter's blunt summary. "Salvage yard," she corrected automatically. "And yes, that's the simple version. Uncle Jack and your grandfather had different ways of seeing things." The truth was more complicated. Sarah barely remembered her uncle, just fragments of childhood memories, visiting the salvage yard when she was younger than Lily. The estrangement had happened when Sarah was 18, sudden and complete. Her father had been tight-lipped about the reasons, just vague references to principles and warnings that some folks can't be trusted with family history. Now, with the bank giving her 90 days before foreclosure, this inheritance was both blessing and burden. The attorney had assured her it could be prepared for a quick sale, the proceeds potentially enough to keep her farm afloat for another season. Another load on shoulders already carrying too much weight. A rusted metal sign appeared around the bend. "Wilson's Salvage. One man's junk, another man's treasure." The pilling lettering made Sarah's throat tighten unexpectedly. She remembered her uncle painting that sign when she was a child, his steady hand carefully forming each letter while explaining to her how salvage was about seeing value where others saw waste. "Wow, it's huge!" Lily pressed her face against the window as the full scope of the property came into view. A sprawling 5-acre lot surrounded by a corrugated metal fence. Beyond the fence, mountains of rusted vehicles, machinery parts, and indeterminate metal created a strange industrial landscape. Sarah parked the truck beside a squat cinder block building that served as the office. The structure looked as neglected as everything else, its windows clouded with years of dust. "Now listen, Lily, this is just a quick trip to check things out. We'll be back home by dinner. But can I explore, please?" Lily was already halfway out of the truck, eyes wide with the same excitement Sarah remembered feeling as a child among these mysterious piles of mechanical wonders. "Stay where I can see you and don't climb on anything." Sarah grabbed the key the attorney had provided, approaching the padlocked office door. "And don't touch anything sharp or rusty." The ancient padlock surrendered to the key with a reluctant groan, and the door swung open with a haunting creak. The musty scent of abandonment greeted her. Dust, old paper, motor oil, and something else she couldn't quite place. Sarah fumbled for a light switch, surprised when the overhead fixture actually flickered to life. The attorney had mentioned that basic utilities had been maintained, but she'd been skeptical. The office interior was like stepping into a time capsule. A heavy metal desk covered with papers and invoices, filing cabinets with drawers partially open, a calendar on the wall from 3 years ago. Everything layered with dust, but otherwise untouched, as if her uncle had simply stepped out for lunch rather than passed away after years battling emphysema in a veteran's home. "One weekend isn't going to cut it," she muttered, running a finger along a dusty shelf lined with odd mechanical parts and curiosities her uncle had apparently considered worth displaying. The rational choice would be to call the attorney immediately, explain this was far more than she'd agreed to handle, hire an auction service to liquidate everything, and never looked back. Outside, she could hear Lily's delighted exclamations as she discovered the organized chaos of the salvage yard. Through the grimy window, Sarah watched her daughter carefully inspecting a row of antique tractor parts, her small hands hovering reverently just above the metal surfaces, remembering her mother's warning not to touch. Something held Sarah there, perhaps curiosity about the uncle she barely remembered, or the nagging questions about why her family had severed ties so completely. Or maybe just the desperate need for any potential financial lifeline for her struggling operation. As daylight began its slow retreat, Sarah decided to stay the night. She'd brought camping supplies in her truck, a small tent, sleeping bags, and a cooler with food and water. Setting up in the office seemed preferable to pitching a tent in the yard. She unrolled their sleeping bags while Lily arranged their modest dinner of sandwiches and chips on a cleared corner of the desk. "Mom, look what I found!" Lily held up a faded photograph in a simple wooden frame, discovered on a shelf behind the stacks of automotive catalogs. Sarah took it gently, wiping away the dust with her thumb. Two young men stood arm in arm in front of the salvage yard entrance, their resemblance unmistakable despite their different builds. Her father, tall and lean, Uncle Jack, shorter and stockier, both with the same Wilson jawline and eyes. They looked happy, proud even. No hint of the rift that would eventually divide them. "That's Grandpa, isn't it? He looks so young." Lily peered at the photo. "And is that Uncle Jack?" Sarah nodded, her throat suddenly tight. "This must have been when they first opened the salvage yard together, before your grandpa decided to focus on farming instead." She set the photo down carefully, the unexpected connection to her father bringing both comfort and an ache of loss. After dinner, drawn by a lifetime of farmers' curiosity about machinery, Sarah began exploring the nearest rows of salvage, Lily skipping ahead excitedly. Most items were mundane: rusted-out tractors, ancient refrigerators, car frames from the 1970s and 80s picked clean of useful parts. But her uncle had been strangely organized in his chaos. Similar items grouped together, pathways maintained between sections, even faded handwritten signs indicating what might be found in each row. Electronics, farm equipment, pre-war vehicles, household, heavy machinery, read the weathered signposts, some barely legible after years of sun exposure. "Mom, what does pre-war mean? Which war?" Lily called out, pointing to one of the signs. "Probably World War II, Sarah answered, impressed by her daughter's question. "Uncle Jack was a Vietnam veteran, but some of this salvage looks far older." As darkness fell completely, they returned to the office, flashlights in hand. Lily yawned widely, the excitement of the day catching up with her. Sarah tucked her daughter into her sleeping bag, smoothing back the stray hairs from her forehead. "Get some rest, sweetie. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do with all this." "I like it here," Lily murmured sleepily. "It feels like a treasure hunt." With Lily drifting off to sleep, Sarah turned her attention to the papers scattered across her uncle's desk. Perhaps his paperwork would offer clues about anything of value amid the acres of junk. Most documents were mundane: utility bills, equipment records, purchase receipts. But as she sorted through them, Sarah found a leather-bound ledger wedged beneath a stack of automotive catalogs. The book was worn, its pages yellowed with age. Opening it, she recognized her uncle's handwriting, the same slanted script from the birthday cards he'd sent before the estrangement. The ledger entries dated back 30 years, chronicling the yard's acquisitions with meticulous detail, often noting where items came from and their potential value. Sarah flipped forward, looking for entries around the time her family had split. There was a gap, several months with no entries, and then a single page with just one line. "Hargrove estate purchase complete. Equipment moved to North Corner." Special instructions followed. Intrigued, Sarah continued reading. The subsequent entries became increasingly cryptic, with references to the North Corner project and verifying the Hargrove claims. One entry simply stated, "Ground-penetrating radar confirms dimensions match the story." As she closed the ledger, her elbow knocked a small metal box from the desk. Bending to retrieve it, Sarah noticed something odd about the floorboards where the box had landed. One board seemed slightly different from the others, the grain pattern inconsistent, the edges more precisely cut. Heart suddenly racing with the universal human response to potential hidden things, Sarah pressed her fingers against it and felt a slight give. She applied more pressure to one end of the board, and it pivoted upward, revealing a small hollow space beneath the floor. A soft voice startled her. "Mom, what's that?" Lily stood beside her, sleep forgotten, eyes wide with curiosity. "I thought you were asleep," Sarah said, recovering from her surprise. The floor made a funny sound. Lily knelt down beside her mother. "Is it a secret compartment? Like in treasure hunt books?" Together they peered into the small cavity. Inside was a brass key unlike any modern one Sarah had seen. Large with an intricate pattern and a complex bit at the end, the kind of key that opens something old and significant. Beside it lay a small notebook, different from the ledger, more like a personal journal. "Can I hold it?" Lily's voice was hushed with awe. Sarah carefully placed the ornate key in her daughter's palm. "It's heavy," Lily observed, running her thumb over the engraved symbols that looked vaguely like bank insignias. Sarah opened the notebook, finding handwritten entries spanning decades. Some pages contained newspaper clippings carefully preserved with yellowing tape. The earliest entries described her uncle's return from Vietnam, his purchase of the salvage business, and early struggles to make it profitable. But midway through, the tone changed dramatically. An entry from 1986 caught her eye. Old man Hargrove finally passed, his children eager to sell his farm equipment. But it's the story he told me last year that won't leave me alone. If even half of it is true, what's buried on his property could change everything. The First National Bank robbery of 1929, vault that disappeared, the missing Depression-era fortune. Everyone thought it was myths, but Hargrove swore his father helped hide it, said it's been sitting beneath junk and earth for decades. Worth the gamble to buy everything from his estate. Sarah's pulse quickened as she read further. Subsequent entries documented her uncle's methodical investigation, tracking down old newspaper articles about the famous unsolved bank robbery, interviewing elderly residents about local legends, and finally secretly using ground-penetrating radar on the north corner of the salvage yard. A newspaper clipping from 1929 headlined, "Daring Bank Heist Shocks Millfield," described how thieves had somehow removed an entire bank vault containing loan notes and safety deposit boxes during the chaos following the stock market crash. The vault and its contents, estimated to be worth millions in today's money, had never been recovered. "They think it was an inside job," one article read. Bank president Edwin Thornton disappeared the same night, presumed to have fled with the thieves. The most shocking detail, the entire 3-ton vault was somehow removed without disturbing the building around it. The final entry in the journal, dated just before Sarah's family's estrangement, read, "I'm certain it's there. The radar shows a large, square, metallic object, dimensions matching the old bank vault specifications, buried 15 feet down beneath layers of farm equipment and soil. I've started laying the groundwork for excavation, but this needs to be handled carefully. Too many powerful families in this town have connections to what happened in 1929. The Thorntons still own half the county. If they learn what's buried here." The entry ended abruptly. The remaining pages were blank. "Mom, what does it say?" Lily asked, peering over her shoulder. Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to share with her 10-year-old. "It looks like Uncle Jack was looking for something valuable that might be buried somewhere in the salvage yard." "Like pirate treasure?" Lily's eyes widened. "Not exactly, more like something historical that got lost a long time ago." Sarah closed the journal, mind reeling. Was this why her uncle and father had fallen out? Did her father believe this treasure hunt was madness? Or was there something darker? Had someone pressured her father to distance the family from Uncle Jack's dangerous historical digging? "Can we look for it tomorrow, please?" Lily bounced on her toes, sleep entirely forgotten now. "We'll see. First, we need to get us some sleep." Sarah tucked the journal and key into her backpack for safekeeping. "And this stays between us for now, okay? No telling anyone about what we found." Lily nodded solemnly, clearly thrilled to be entrusted with a secret. "Cross my heart." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Sarah that night. Her mind whirled with possibilities. If her uncle's journal was accurate, there could be something of extraordinary value buried on this property. Something that might not just save her farm, but transform their lives entirely. Yet the cryptic warnings about powerful families and the abrupt end to her uncle's notice suggested danger she wasn't eager to expose Lily to. By dawn, Sarah had made a decision. They would investigate cautiously before deciding whether to sell the property. Specifically, they would find this north corner her uncle had referenced repeatedly. Morning arrived with merciless summer heat already building by 7 a.m. After a quick breakfast from their cooler, Sarah studied the property layout. The salvage yard formed a rough rectangle with the office near the entrance on the south side. The north corner would be the furthest point from where they stood. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked Lily, who responded with an enthusiastic nod. "Remember, stay close to me, and if I say we need to leave, no arguments." Grabbing her uncle's journal, the mysterious key, and bottles of water, they began navigating through the labyrinth of junk. Sarah was grateful she'd worn sturdy boots as they picked their way through decades of accumulated metal and machinery. Lily moved with the nimble energy of childhood, squeezing through narrow passages that Sarah had to navigate more carefully. The pathways grew narrower and less maintained as they moved deeper into the property. Some areas required them to squeeze between precariously stacked washing machines or clamber over immobile tractors consumed by weeds and rust. "Mom, look!" Lily called out, pointing to a faded sign mostly obscured by overgrown vines. Sarah carefully pulled away the vegetation to reveal the words "North Corner, Special" painted in her uncle's distinctive handwriting. "Good eye, Lily." Sarah checked her uncle's rough property map. "We're getting close." Lily darted ahead, her excitement propelling her forward. "There's a big open space up here." "Lily, wait," Sarah called, hurrying to catch up. When she rounded the final stack of rusted farm equipment, she found her daughter standing in a clearing, unlike any other area of the salvage yard. Unlike the relatively organized sections near the entrance, this area appeared deliberately chaotic. Ancient farming equipment, threshers, plows, and harvesters from the 1940s and 50s, had been arranged in a rough circle around a central clearing approximately 40 feet in diameter. In the clearing stood a single piece of equipment, a massive rusted crane that appeared to date from the 1970s. Its boom extended upward at a slight angle, cables dangling uselessly. The ground beneath the crane was different from the rest of the yard, not the hard-packed dirt and gravel, but softer soil with sparse weeds. This had to be it, the location her uncle had identified. But digging 15 feet down would require heavy equipment and expertise Sarah didn't possess. Even if she could operate the ancient crane, it wasn't designed for excavation work. "Is this where the treasure is?" Lily whispered, sensing the significance of their discovery. "Maybe," Sarah replied, approaching the crane cautiously. Uncle Jack seemed to think something important was buried here. Up close, the crane looked less decrepit than it had from a distance. While its exterior was rusted and weathered, certain mechanical components appeared surprisingly well maintained. The operator's cabin was locked with a modern padlock securing the door. Sarah examined the control panel visible through the cabin window. Unlike the rest of the crane, it had been retrofitted with newer components. Near the bottom of the panel was something unusual, an antique brass plate with a keyhole that matched the style of her key. "Mom, someone's coming!" Lily's urgent whisper cut through Sarah's concentration. The sound of tires on gravel reached them. Someone had driven into the salvage yard. "Quick, hide behind that harvester," Sarah instructed, guiding Lily toward a rusted combine. They ducked down, peering through gaps in the machinery as a black SUV with tinted windows parked near the office. Two men emerged, one older with silver hair, perhaps in his 60s, the other younger, athletically built, scanning the yard with practiced efficiency. The older man held what appeared to be legal documents. "Miss Wilson?" the older man called out. "We know you're here. Your truck is parked outside. I'm Richard Thornton, president of First Millfield Bank. We have a business proposition regarding your inheritance." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Thornton, the same family name as the bank president who disappeared in 1929. Her mind raced, connecting her uncle's journal entries with these unexpected visitors. Whatever was buried here, the Thornton family apparently knew about it too, and had for generations. "Stay here and don't make a sound," Sarah whispered to Lily, who nodded with wide, frightened eyes. "If anything happens, run to the truck and lock the doors." Sarah remained hidden, watching as the younger man began methodically checking the office and nearby areas. She couldn't stay concealed forever in the sprawling junkyard, but something told her revealing herself immediately would be a mistake. These men hadn't come with friendly intentions, not at 7:30 a.m. to a property they shouldn't even know she was visiting. The key in her pocket suddenly felt heavier, more significant. Whatever her uncle had discovered had drawn the attention of the most powerful family in the county, and now Sarah found herself at the center of a mystery that had remained buried, literally for nearly a century. Across the salvage yard, Richard Thornton removed his sunglasses and surveyed the mountains of scrap metal with obvious distaste. "Your uncle was a stubborn man, Miss Wilson," he called out, voice carrying across the quiet yard. "He refused a very generous offer for this property. We're prepared to extend that same offer to you, in fact, to improve upon it substantially, 3 times the market value in cash. You could save your family farm with what we're offering." The mention of her struggling farm sent a chill through Sarah. They'd done their research on her financial situation. They knew exactly what leverage to apply. But how had they known she would be here today? Unless someone from the attorney's office had informed them. A sudden crash and a small cry made Sarah's blood freeze. Lily had accidentally knocked over a stack of metal parts while trying to shift position. The younger man's head snapped toward the sound, and he moved with alarming speed toward their hiding place. "Run, Lily," Sarah shouted, abandoning concealment to draw attention away from her daughter. But the man was too quick, catching Lily by the arm as she tried to dart between 2 tractor shells. "Look what we have here," he said, his grip firm on Lily's upper arm. "Must be the Wilson girl." Sarah emerged from hiding, fury overriding fear. "Let go of my daughter right now." The younger man maintained his hold, not tight enough to hurt Lily, but secure enough to prevent escape. Her daughter's face was pale with fear, but Sarah could see her fighting to be brave. Thornton approached with a placating smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No one wants any trouble here, Miss Wilson, especially not for a lovely child. We're simply here to discuss business." He nodded to his associate, who released Lily. She immediately ran to Sarah, who pulled her close protectively. "There's nothing to discuss," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This property is mine to deal with as I see fit." "Of course," Thornton agreed smoothly, "and I'm offering you a way to deal with it very profitably. $1.5 million, Miss Wilson. Hesh, more than enough to clear your farm's debt and modernize your operation." He extended a business card. "Think about it. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." Sarah didn't take the card. "How did you know I was here?" Thornton's smile tightened slightly. "Millfield is a small community, Miss Wilson. Word travels. Your uncle's obsessions were well known to certain parties. I'm simply offering you a way to benefit from his eccentric collecting without becoming entangled in his more fanciful pursuits." "And what pursuits were those?" "Fairy tales, myths, stories old men tell in bars about missing bank vaults and Depression-era fortunes." Thornton's tone was dismissive, but his eyes were sharp, watching her reaction. "Your uncle wasted years chasing shadows. I'm offering you a solid reality. Money that could change your life and your daughter's future." Sarah felt Lily trembling against her side. She wanted these men gone. "I'll consider your offer. Now please leave. This is private property." "Of course." Thornton nodded to his associate. "Davis, let's go. Miss Wilson needs time to think." As they turned to leave, Thornton paused. "One word of advice. Be careful what you dig up around here. Some things are buried for good reasons. You're making a serious mistake if you follow your uncle's path." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Sarah watched silently as the 2 men returned to their SUV and drove away, dust billowing behind them. "Mom, I'm sorry I made noise," Lily whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Sarah knelt down, holding her daughter's shoulders. "It's not your fault, honey, but now you see why we need to be careful. Those men aren't nice people. They want the treasure, don't they?" Lily's perception surprised Sarah. "The bank man has the same name as the one in Uncle Jack's notebook." "You read the journal?" Sarah asked, momentarily distracted. Lily looked down guiltily. "Just a little bit, when you were asleep." "I'm sorry." Sarah sighed. "It's okay, but yes, I think they might be after the same thing Uncle Jack was looking for." which means we need to decide what we're going to do, accept their offer and walk away, or figure out what's really buried here. We can't let the mean men have it, Lily said with the absolute moral certainty of childhood. Uncle Jack wanted us to find it, not them. That's why he left us the key. Before Sarah could respond, the sound of another vehicle approaching made them both tense. But this wasn't the sleek SUV returning. It was an old pickup truck, faded blue and covered in dust. It parked next to Sarah's truck, and from it emerged an elderly woman, perhaps in her 70s, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, her posture straight despite her age. "Miss Wilson?" the woman called out, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "I believe you found my father's legacy. I'm Eleanor Hargrove." Sarah and Lily exchanged startled glances. Hargrove, the same name from Uncle Jack's journal. "Stay close to me," Sarah murmured to Lily as they cautiously approached the woman. "How did you know we were here?" Eleanor Hargrove offered a thin smile. "I saw Thornton's vehicle leaving. I've been watching this place for decades, ever since your uncle bought my father's equipment. I knew this day would come eventually." There was something in the older woman's direct gaze that inspired trust, despite Sarah's caution. "Maybe we should talk somewhere else," Sarah suggested, glancing around the exposed yard. "Somewhere more private." Eleanor nodded. "There's a diner about 2 miles down the road. Been there since before I was born. Good coffee, and the walls don't have ears." 20 minutes later, they were seated in a worn vinyl booth at the back of Millie's Diner, a small roadside establishment that looked unchanged since the 1950s. Lily sipped a chocolate milkshake while the adults nursed mugs of coffee. "William Hargrove was my father," Eleanor began once the waitress had moved out of earshot. "He helped hide that vault in 1929, along with others who were trying to keep the town's wealth from disappearing after the crash." Sarah leaned forward, keeping her voice low. "So it's true? There really is a bank vault buried on my uncle's property?" Eleanor nodded. The bank president, Edwin Thornton, had been secretly embezzling for years. When the market collapsed, he planned to flee with everything: people's life savings, their loan notes, property deeds, family heirlooms stored in safety deposit boxes. "And that's Richard Thornton's grandfather?" Lily asked, fascinated despite the seriousness of the conversation. "Great-grandfather," Eleanor corrected. "My father was part of a group that intercepted Thornton and his associates as they were loading the vault onto a train. They brought it here, then just an unused field, and buried it for safekeeping. The plan was to return the contents to their rightful owners once things settled down, but that never happened." Eleanor's weathered face hardened. "Edwin Thornton was found dead a week later. The authorities blamed the men who'd stopped the theft. 3 were hanged, including my grandfather. The others scattered, taking their knowledge of the vault's location with them. My father kept silent to stay alive, especially after Edwin's son took control of the bank and most of the town. And the Thornton family has been searching for it ever since," Sarah concluded, pieces falling into place. "For generations, they've known it was somewhere on this original property, but couldn't pinpoint the location. My uncle was the first to use modern technology to confirm exactly where." Sarah withdrew the brass key from her pocket, sliding it across the table. "This opens the vault?" Eleanor studied it, nodding slowly. "Half of the locking mechanism. It's a 2-key system, standard for bank vaults of that era. Then Edwin Thornton would have had the other key, which his family likely still possesses." Sarah realized with growing certainty, that's why Richard Thornton wants this property so badly. Eleanor nodded grimly. "They've tried buying every parcel of the original land over the years. Your uncle was the only owner who refused to sell and who actually figured out what was here." "Why are you telling us all this?" Sarah asked, the weight of this historical conspiracy settling uncomfortably on her shoulders. "Because I made a promise to my father before he died. If that vault was ever found, its contents should be returned to the descendants of the original owners, not claimed by the Thorntons, who tried to steal it in the first place." Eleanor reached into her jacket pocket and withdrew a folded document. "This is a list of the families who had safety deposit boxes and accounts at First National in 1929. Your own great-grandparents are on it." Sarah took the paper with trembling hands, scanning down to the bottom. "Wilson, Edward, and May. Farm loan note, 1,200, and family jewelry." That loan note ruined my father's family during the Depression, Eleanor explained. With the bank records gone, the Thornton family claimed the Wilsons still owed the debt, plus interest. They eventually took half the original Wilson farmland as payment. Your family history and mine are bound together by what's buried here. The implications staggered Sarah. Her family's financial struggles through the generations, the lost land, even her current predicament with the farm, all potentially stemming from that buried vault and its contents. What do we do now? Sarah asked, glancing at Lily, who was absorbing every word with wide-eyed attention. Thornton clearly knows we're looking. And that crane, I don't even know if it works, let alone how to operate it to dig out something buried 15 feet down. The crane works, Eleanor said with quiet certainty. Your uncle maintained it specifically for this purpose. I've seen him testing it over the years, though he never got to use it for the excavation. As for what to do, she paused, considering. Thornton will be back, probably with reinforcements. If we're going to recover that vault, we need to move quickly, and we need help. Help from who? Sarah's instinct was to keep this quiet, to protect Lily from whatever danger might come with challenging the Thornton family's power. There are others in town, descendants of the original families who lost everything when those records disappeared. People who've heard the stories passed down through generations, who might be willing to help if they knew the vault was real. The diner's bell jingled as new customers entered. Eleanor glanced over, then lowered her voice further. Tonight, come back to the salvage yard after dark. I'll bring people we can trust. As they left the diner, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities and dangers. She helped Lily into the truck, then paused, looking back at Eleanor. My father and uncle, their fight. Was it about this? Eleanor's expression softened with something like pity. Your father was afraid, Sarah. Afraid of what would happen if your uncle succeeded. The Thorntons have destroyed people for less. He thought he was protecting you by staying away from Jack and his crazy theories. And now I've dragged my daughter right into the middle of it, Sarah said, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. Some truths don't stay buried forever, Eleanor replied, no matter how deep someone digs the hole. The first fat drops of rain splattered against the windshield as Sarah drove back toward the salvage yard. Beside her, Lily dozed against the passenger door, exhausted from the morning's discoveries and revelations. Sarah had spent the afternoon debating their next move, accept Thornton's money and walk away, or pursue whatever lay buried beneath her uncle's property. Each option carried its own weight of consequence. The decision crystallized when she checked her bank account on her phone. 3 missed mortgage payments already. The latest foreclosure notice wasn't a bluff. She had weeks, not months, before losing everything her family had built for generations. Her financial situation wasn't just dire, it was terminal without intervention. Darkness had settled by the time they arrived, the salvage yard's rusted entrance barely visible in her headlights. 3 pickup trucks were already parked outside. Eleanor had clearly been busy. Sarah gently shook Lily awake. We don't have to do this, Sarah whispered, doubt creeping in. We could still sell to Thornton, save the farm, forget all of this. Lily rubbed sleep from her eyes, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. Uncle Jack wouldn't have left us the key if he didn't think we should find what he was looking for. And that mean man doesn't deserve it. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah felt a flush of pride at her daughter's simple moral clarity, something adults so often lost in the gray areas of compromise. She tucked a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. Stay close to me, okay? If anything feels wrong or scary, you tell me immediately. Inside the salvage yard office, they found Eleanor with 5 others, a silver-haired Hispanic man in his 60s, a middle-aged Asian woman, an elderly black couple, and a muscular man in his 30s who shared the older Hispanic man's features. They looked up as Sarah and Lily entered, their faces a mixture of hope and wariness. This is Sarah Wilson and her daughter Lily, Eleanor made quick introductions. Michael Ramirez and his son Miguel, Maria Chen, and the Washingtons, James and Ruth, all descendants of families with accounts at First National when the vault disappeared. Michael Ramirez stepped forward, calloused hands bearing the marks of decades of manual labor. My grandfather lost our dairy farm when the bank claimed he hadn't paid his loan in full. The receipt was in his safety deposit box inside that vault. One by one, they shared similar stories. Businesses lost, land foreclosed, heirlooms vanished, all tracing back to the missing vault. Their collective history of loss created an instant bond, transcending the fact that they were strangers. How old were you when your family lost the farm? Lily's question to Maria Chen broke a momentary silence. Maria's weathered face softened. 10 years old, just like you are now. That's why this matters, Ruth Washington added, her elegant hands folded in her lap. Not just for the money, though. Lord knows some compensation is due. It's about setting right a wrong that shaped all our families for generations. Miguel Ramirez, broad-shouldered and practical, brought the conversation back to immediate concerns. The question is, how do we excavate a 3-ton vault buried 15 feet underground before Thornton brings in reinforcements? The crane, Sarah pulled out her uncle's journal. Jack modified it specifically for this purpose. There's an excavation attachment designed to dig without damaging what's beneath. I can help with that, Miguel nodded. I'm a mechanic. If your uncle maintained the hydraulics, we might have a chance. Eleanor spread a crude map of the property on the desk. We need lookouts here and here. She pointed to the entrance and the road approaching it. Thornton will return, probably with the sheriff in tow. We need warning. James Washington tapped the map thoughtfully. How long will the excavation take? Uncle Jack estimated 8 hours of continuous digging to reach 15 feet, Sarah answered. Less if we're lucky with soil conditions. 8 hours we don't have, Michael shook his head. Thornton will be back long before then. Then we work in shifts, Maria suggested. Some dig, some keep watch, others rest. We can bring in more people, others who've heard the stories, who have stakes in what's buried there. Sarah hesitated, looking at Lily. The more people involved, the riskier this gets. The more people involved, the harder for Thornton to shut us down, Eleanor countered. This isn't just your fight, Sarah. It belongs to everyone in this room and dozens more families besides. By midnight, a plan had formed. They would begin excavation at dawn, bringing in trusted community members throughout the day. Miguel would examine the crane tonight to ensure it was operational. The Washingtons would organize a rotation of lookouts. Maria would coordinate supplies, food, water, tools. What about me? Lily piped up, unwilling to be left out. Sarah started to protest, but Maria intervened. We need a runner, someone small and quick who can carry messages between groups, someone the adults might not notice. Lily straightened, pride evident in her posture. I can do that. Get some rest, Eleanor advised as the meeting broke up. Tomorrow will test us all. After the others left, Sarah and Lily returned to their sleeping bags in the office. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah lay awake, listening to the rain pattering on the metal roof, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or possibly rectifying the biggest injustice in her family's history. Dawn arrived with relentless summer heat already building, the previous night's rain creating a sticky humidity that clung to skin and clothes. Miguel had worked through the night, and now the ancient crane's diesel engine rumbled to life, black smoke belching from its exhaust stack, before settling into a steady mechanical heartbeat. It's solid, Miguel called down from the operator's cabin. Your uncle knew his machines. The hydraulics are practically new, and he's added a specialized digging attachment I've never seen before, custom built. Sarah approached the control panel, inserting the brass key into the matching keyhole. It turned smoothly, and a small compartment beneath the seat popped open, revealing a leather folder. Inside was a complete operational manual for the crane, handwritten by her uncle, along with detailed notes on what lay beneath the soil. Depression-era bank vault, his notes confirmed. First National Bank of Millfield. Stolen October 29th, 1929. One day after Black Monday. Contains estimated $2.4 million in cash, 1929 value, gold certificates, property deeds, and safety deposit boxes belonging to 15 local families. Current value impossible to calculate, potentially tens of millions. Tucked behind these notes was a black and white photograph from 1929 showing the original bank president, Edwin Thornton, standing proudly before the vault. The resemblance to Richard Thornton was unmistakable, like looking at the same man across generations. Vault secured with dual key system, her uncle's notes continued, Primary key recovered from Hargrove estate. Second key allegedly in possession of Thornton family, passed down through generations. Both required to access contents. By mid-morning, the excavation was underway. A growing group of community members arrived, bringing equipment, food, and determination. Miguel operated the crane while others formed bucket brigades to remove soil faster than the machine could work alone. Sarah coordinated the operation, surprised by her own calm in the face of such high stakes. Lily took to her role as messenger with serious dedication, running between the diggers and the lookouts positioned along the road, relaying updates and warnings. The physical labor created an unexpected camaraderie among people connected only by decades-old injustice. The pit grew steadily deeper, revealing layers of soil undisturbed for nearly a century. At the 8-foot mark, the bucket scraped against something metallic. Sarah's heart leaped, but it was only an old piece of farm equipment deliberately placed as camouflage. "Your uncle was thorough," Eleanor remarked, wiping sweat from her brow. "He must have known someone might try using metal detectors to find the vault." As noon approached, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The air grew heavier, charged with the threat of an approaching storm. The wind picked up, whipping dust into stinging clouds that made visibility difficult. Sarah checked the weather on her phone. A severe thunderstorm warning had been issued for the county. "We should pause until it passes," Sarah suggested, eyeing the darkening sky. Michael shook his head firmly. "If we stop now, we might never get another chance. Thornton is gathering his forces as we speak." The first thunderclap rolled across the sky just as they reached the 12-foot mark. Rain began to fall, light at first, then in sheets that turned the excavation site into a muddy pit. The work became treacherous, soil slick and heavy, the sides of the hole threatening to collapse. "Mom!" Lily's voice carried over the storm as she ran toward the pit, rainwater plastering her hair to her face. "Mr. Washington says there's cars coming." "Lots of them." Sarah looked at their progress. They were close, maybe 3 feet from their target, but not there yet. She had seconds to decide. "Miguel, keep digging. Everyone else, form a line at the entrance. Don't confront them. Just stall." The crane's engine roared as Miguel pushed it harder, the specialized digging attachment churning through mud and clay. Sarah jumped down into the pit to help clear soil from around the bucket, the rain soaking her to the skin within seconds. "Sarah, look out!" Eleanor's warning came just as a section of the pit wall collapsed, sending mud cascading toward her. Sarah threw herself backward, narrowly avoiding being buried. The pit was becoming dangerously unstable. "Get out of there," Miguel called from the crane cabin. "It's not safe." Sarah scrambled up the makeshift ladder they'd built, mud clinging to her boots and making each rung treacherous. Just as she reached the top, the crane's bucket struck something solid, a flat metallic surface. "We found it!" Miguel's shout carried over the storm's fury. At the salvage yard entrance, a convoy of vehicles arrived. Thornton's black SUV, 2 sheriff's department cruisers, and several other expensive cars. Richard Thornton emerged from his vehicle, umbrella in hand, flanked by Sheriff Roberts and several deputies. Behind them stood a group of men in suits, lawyers by the look of them. "This is private property," Thornton shouted above the storm. "Sheriff, I want everyone here arrested for trespassing and theft." Eleanor stepped forward, rain streaming down her face. "The only theft happened in 1929 when your great-grandfather tried to steal this town's wealth." Sheriff Roberts, a paunchy man in his 50s, looked uncertainly between Thornton and the assembled townspeople. "Mr. Thornton claims legal ownership of whatever's buried here, says it belongs to the bank." "That's convenient," Michael Ramirez replied, "since his family owns the bank that tried to steal it in the first place." The confrontation escalated as both sides held their ground. Lily slipped away from the crowd, darting between vehicles back toward the excavation site. Sarah, noticing her daughter's absence, felt a stab of panic. At the pit, Miguel had cleared enough soil to reveal the top of an enormous steel vault. Once green paint now darkened with age, but the words First National Bank of Millfield still visible in brass lettering. The rain had turned the pit into a mud bath, water pooling around the exposed portion of the vault. "Lily, what are you doing here?" Sarah found her daughter standing at the edge of the pit, staring down at their discovery with wide eyes. "I had to see if it was real," Lily whispered, awe in her voice. It is, isn't it? Just like in Uncle Jack's journal. Before Sarah could respond, Davis, Thornton's younger associate, appeared behind them. Mr. Thornton wants you at the front gate, Miss Wilson, now. His hand closed around Lily's arm, making her wince. Let go of my daughter. Sarah's voice dropped to a dangerous register. Your little treasure hunt is over. Davis tightened his grip on Lily. Mr. Thornton has a court order declaring this excavation illegal. You're all trespassing. Lily stomped hard on the man's instep, then twisted away as he yelped in pain. She ran to Sarah, who pushed her daughter protectively behind her. That's assault on a minor. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Touch my daughter again, and I'll have you arrested. Davis lunged forward, but Miguel jumped down from the crane cabin, placing himself between them. Back off, Miguel towered over the other man, his size and the mud covering his work clothes, making him an intimidating figure. The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of a new vehicle, a state police cruiser with lights flashing. From it emerged a serious-looking woman in a business suit flanked by two uniformed officers. Special Investigator Jennifer Martinez, State Financial Crimes Unit, she announced, displaying credentials to the increasingly soggy gathering. We received multiple calls about the discovery of evidence related to the 1929 First National Bank theft. I'm hereby securing this scene pending full investigation. Thornton blanched visibly. This is a local matter. A bank robbery is federal jurisdiction, Mr. Thornton, Martinez corrected, especially one involving negotiable instruments, gold certificates, and safety deposit contents. My team will secure the vault until federal agents arrive. The sudden shift in power was palpable. Sheriff Roberts, clearly uncertain where his loyalties should now lie, stepped back to confer with his deputies. Thornton's lawyers huddled under a shared umbrella, speaking in urgent whispers. As the state officers established a perimeter, Sarah approached the vault with Eleanor at her side. The massive circular door, untouched for nearly a century, featured an intricate locking mechanism. It needs both keys and the correct combination to open, Eleanor explained, rain streaming down her face. The combination died with my father. Thornton, overhearing, gave a thin smile despite his obvious frustration. Which means we'll need cutting tools to open it. Equipment that will take days to arrange. Sarah said quietly, withdrawing the brass key from her pocket. We used the keys as intended, along with the combination your ancestor thought no one else knew. Thornton's smile vanished. Impossible. That combination died with my great-grandfather. Not quite, Eleanor contradicted. My father was there when they buried the vault. The combination was the date, October 29th, 1929, the day after Black Monday, the day your ancestor tried to flee with the town's wealth. Investigator Martinez stepped forward. I'll need to document this process officially. Both key holders will turn their keys simultaneously while I enter the combination. Everything will be inventoried and secured by my officers. Sarah and Thornton faced each other across the vault door, each holding a key that separately was worthless, but together would unlock answers buried for nearly a century. You don't have to do this, Thornton said quietly, for Sarah's ears only. Whatever your financial troubles, I can solve them. Name your price. Sarah thought of her struggling farm, the generations of hardship her family had endured, the mysterious rift that had separated her father and uncle, all potentially stemming from what lay inside this vault. Some things aren't for sale, Mr. Thornton. Some things are about justice, not profit. Sarah inserted her key into the left-hand lock. With visible reluctance, Thornton inserted his key into the right-hand keyhole. At Martinez's signal, they turned simultaneously while she dialed the combination. For a moment, nothing happened. Then came a series of metallic clicks as tumblers fell into place for the first time since 1929. The massive handle, frozen for decades, suddenly yielded to Martinez's pull. The vault door swung open with surprising smoothness, revealing contents that had remained hidden and untouched through depression, war, and nearly a century of searching. Cash in neatly bundled stacks, gold certificates, property deeds, safety deposit boxes arranged in numbered rows, and most damning of all, a handwritten ledger showing loan payments received but never credited, including those from the Wilson, Ramirez, Chen, Washington, and dozen other families represented among the diggers. This changes everything, Martinez said quietly, surveying the contents. The legal implications alone will take years to unravel. As Sarah stared at the evidence of her great-grandparents' fully paid loan, the debt that had cost her family half their land and burdened generations with financial struggle, she felt a strange sense of completion. Her uncle hadn't been chasing conspiracy theories or buried treasure for its own sake. He'd been searching for truth, a truth that now, finally, in a salvage yard on a stormy evening, had emerged from the earth after 96 years of darkness. Richard Thornton, ashen-faced as officers began photographing and documenting the vault's contents, seemed to physically diminish before her eyes. A man watching the carefully maintained family myth of respectability crumble in real time. "Your uncle tried to tell my father," Sarah said to Eleanor, as they watched the process unfold. "That's why they fell out. My father must have been afraid of what would happen if they challenged the Thorntons." Eleanor nodded. "Many were, my first shamanit. Fear has kept this buried for generations." Dawn broke over Wilson's salvage yard, casting long shadows across a scene transformed overnight. Yellow police tape created a perimeter around the excavation site. State and federal officials moved with practiced efficiency, cataloging and photographing the vault's contents. News vans lined the access road, reporters gesturing excitedly as they delivered updates to a story rapidly capturing national attention. Sarah sat on an overturned crate near her truck, exhausted but unable to rest. The last 12 hours had passed in a blur of official statements, signed affidavits, and endless questions. Her phone battery had died hours ago from the constant stream of calls, from journalists, from distant relatives suddenly interested in family history, from bank officials seeking comment. "Here," Eleanor said, approaching with a thermos of coffee. "You look like you need this more than I do." Sarah accepted gratefully. "How are you so calm? This is overwhelming." The older woman settled beside her. "When you've carried a secret for decades, there's a certain relief in finally seeing it in the light. Like setting down a heavy load you've carried so long, you forgot it wasn't part of you." They watched in companionable silence as officials wheeled out a cart loaded with safety deposit boxes, each sealed with evidence tape. "What happens now?" Sarah wondered aloud. "Legally, years of sorting through ownership claims. I expect the cash and gold certificates technically belong to the bank's insurance company or their successors. The safety deposit contents should go to the descendants of box holders once they're identified. The loan documents," Eleanor smiled slightly, "those might be the most valuable items of all for families like yours." Investigator Martinez approached, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Wilson, we've completed the preliminary inventory. I wanted to update you personally, since this is technically your property." Martinez led them to a folding table where several documents lay protected in clear evidence sleeves. "We found this in a special compartment inside the vault door," she explained, indicating what appeared to be a leather-bound journal. "It appears to be Edwin Thornton's personal record of his activities. A confession, essentially." Sarah leaned closer. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as if written by someone in haste. "October 28th, 1929, Martinez read, when Maon. Thornton documented how he'd been falsifying bank records for years, marking loans as unpaid when they had been satisfied, claiming properties through foreclosure, then selling them at profit to his associates. When the market crashed, he feared discovery was inevitable, so he planned to disappear with all evidence of his crimes and the town's wealth. According to his final entry, dated the night of the theft, he was betrayed by his accomplices," Eleanor added. "They took the vault without him, leaving him behind. He was writing this as he heard them coming to silence him." Sarah thought of Richard Thornton's ashen face the previous evening as the vault was opened. Had he known the truth about his great-grandfather? Or had the Thornton family built their dynasty on a carefully constructed lie passed down through generations? "There's something else," Martinez continued, sliding forward in another document. "This was found with your great-grandparents' loan papers. It's the original deed to the Wilson farmland. All 300 acres, not just the 150 your family currently owns." Sarah stared at the yellow document, its significance slowly sinking in. "Are you saying the foreclosure that cost your family half their land was fraudulent? The loan had been paid in full before the records disappeared. Similar situations for about 24 other families." Martinez's professional demeanor softened slightly. Ms. Wilson, this discovery may have significant implications for current property ownership throughout the county. As Martinez was called away to consult with federal agents, Sarah remained transfixed by the document before her. The land her father had worked himself to exhaustion trying to buy back. The acres her mother still grieved over, where 4 generations of Wilsons had planted and harvested before corporate agriculture swallowed the parcels one by one. Looks like you might end up with more than a salvage yard from this inheritance, Eleanor observed quietly. If these records hold up legally, Sarah replied, not daring to hope too much. They will, came a new voice. Michael Ramirez joined them, his expression solemn but eyes bright with vindication. My son's a property lawyer. He says documents like these, with clear chain of custody from a bank vault, carry significant legal weight, especially with Thornton's confession contextualizing the circumstances. A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Richard Thornton had returned, this time accompanied by several men in expensive suits, lawyers undoubtedly. His expression was thunderous as he was stopped at the police line, credentials scrutinized before he was allowed to pass. Thornton made a beeline for Martinez, gesturing emphatically as the two engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. After several minutes, Martinez shook her head firmly and turned away, leaving Thornton standing alone, fists clenched at his sides. Round 2 begins, Michael muttered. The Thorntons won't surrender their power without a fight. As if sensing their attention, Thornton's gaze found Sarah. After a moment's hesitation, he approached their small group. Ms. Wilson, I'd like to speak with you privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my friends, Sarah replied evenly. Thornton glanced at Eleanor and Michael, then back to Sarah. Very well. I'm authorized to offer you $5 million for this property and all rights to any claims arising from documents found within the vault. The sum was staggering, enough to save her farm many times over, to modernize equipment, to live comfortably for the rest of her life, to secure Lily's education through any college she might choose. Yet the offer felt hollow, tainted. And what about the other families? The Ramirez, the Hargroves, the Chens, the Washingtons, everyone else whose ancestors lost land and livelihoods because records conveniently disappeared? Their claims are speculative at best, Thornton dismissed. Yours is the only property with documented evidence of wrongdoing, which is why I'm prepared to settle with you specifically. The others would be best served accepting reality rather than chasing ancient history. The casual cruelty of his statement, dismissing generations of hardship as mere ancient history, crystallized something in Sarah. This wasn't just about her farm or her family. It was about a community shaped by an injustice so profound it had altered the trajectory of countless lives. No, she said simply. Thornton blinked, clearly unaccustomed to rejection. I don't think you understand the gravity. I understand perfectly, Sarah interrupted. You're offering to buy my silence, to keep this contained. But these records don't just belong to me. They belong to everyone affected by what your great-grandfather did. You're making a serious mistake, Thornton warned, his composed veneer cracking. $5 million is more than generous for a failing farmer with a mountain of debt. Sarah stood, facing him directly. You know what's interesting, Mr. Thornton? Yesterday morning, I would have probably taken that offer. I was desperate, scared of losing my family's land. But standing here now, I realize something my uncle understood that my father never did. Some things matter more than money. Principles won't save your farm, he sneered. Maybe not, Sarah acknowledged, but they might help me sleep at night, and they might help restore what your family has taken from this community over generations. Thornton's face darkened. Don't romanticize this, Miss Wilson. You've stumbled into matters far beyond your understanding. My family built this county when it was nothing but dirt and desperation. We provided jobs, infrastructure, stability. Built on stolen land and falsified debts, Eleanor interjected, her voice steady despite her age. Built on the broken backs of families who worked twice as hard to replace what was taken from them. The courts will sort this out, Sarah said with finality. I suggest you prepare your legal team, Mr. Thornton. I suspect you'll need it. As Thornton stormed away, Michael clapped Sarah's shoulder. You just made an enemy for life, young lady. The Thorntons aren't accustomed to defiance. Maybe that's been the problem all along, Sarah replied. Throughout the day, the excavation site transformed into something resembling an archaeological dig. Federal historians joined the investigation, fascinated by the time capsule aspect of the vault's contents. News coverage intensified as the story spread beyond local interest to national networks. By late afternoon, Sarah found herself seated in a hastily arranged town hall meeting. The county commissioner, looking distinctly uncomfortable, presided over a gathering of local officials, affected families, and state representatives. Due to the extraordinary nature of this discovery, the commissioner announced, the governor has authorized formation of a special commission to evaluate all claims arising from the recovered documents. Property disputes, banking records, and personal items will be addressed through appropriate legal channels. A state attorney stood to explain the process. We're establishing a claims office where descendants of the original account holders can register their interest. Documentation will be required to establish lineage, but the recovered records provide substantial verification for many families. From her seat, Sarah watched the proceedings with a sense of surreal detachment. 24 hours ago, she had been a struggling farmer dreading a weekend clearing junk. Now she was at the center of what one news outlet had dubbed the vault that changed history. As the meeting progressed, various community members stood to share family stories. Tales passed down through generations about land lost, debts doubled, opportunities denied. Stories that had shaped the economic landscape of Millfield County for nearly a century, creating distinct divides between those who prospered and those who merely survived. When the formal presentations concluded, Eleanor approached the microphone, her small frame commanding immediate attention. "I've carried the truth about that vault since I was a child," she began, her voice strong despite her years. "My father made me promise to remember, to never let the story die. He believed that someday the truth would emerge." The room fell silent, captivated. "We're not just talking about property deeds and banknotes," Eleanor continued. "We're talking about justice delayed by nearly a century, about families who worked twice as hard to replace what was taken, about children who couldn't attend college because their parents were still paying for land that should have been theirs outright." She paused, surveying the room. "But this discovery isn't just about the past. It's about the future we choose to build now that the truth has finally surfaced. Will we perpetuate old divisions or use this moment to heal wounds that have festered for generations?" As Eleanor returned to her seat amid respectful applause, Sarah felt a nudge from Michael. "Your turn," he whispered. "People need to hear from you." Sarah shook her head. "I didn't do anything special. I just found a key." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Michael replied. "One person willing to turn the key that others have walked past." Reluctantly, Sarah made her way to the microphone. The room quieted expectantly. "I'm not good at speeches," she began awkwardly. 3 days ago, I was just trying to keep my farm from foreclosure. I went to clear out my uncle's salvage yard, hoping to make enough from the sale to keep the bank at bay for another season." She took a steadying breath. "What I found instead was the culmination of my uncle's lifelong search, a search that cost him relationships, that labeled him eccentric or obsessed. He died believing in something most people dismissed as legend or conspiracy theory." Sarah gestured toward the community members seated around her. "But he was right, and his persistence has given all of us a chance to correct a historical wrong that shaped this community for generations. I don't know what happens next legally, but I know that nothing can be the same after today." As she concluded to warm applause, Sarah caught sight of Richard Thornton standing at the back of the room, arms crossed, expression inscrutable. Their gazes locked briefly before he turned and exited through a side door. The meeting eventually adjourned with plans for follow-up sessions in the establishment of the claims process. As people filtered out, many stopped to shake Sarah's hand or share family stories connected to the 1929 bank incident. "Miss Wilson," a voice called as Sarah finally headed toward the exit. She turned to find Investigator Martinez approaching with a leather portfolio. "A moment of your time?" They found a quiet corner where Martinez opened the portfolio, revealing several documents. "We've completed preliminary authentication of the materials relating specifically to your family," she explained. "The Wilson farm loan was indeed paid in full before the bank robbery. According to property laws regarding fraudulent foreclosure, you may have legal claim to the full original acreage." Sarah stared at the documents, hardly daring to believe. The eastern parcels, the ones my father tried for years to buy back. Martinez nodded. Currently owned by Millfield Agricultural Holdings, a subsidiary of Thornton Enterprises. They'll fight this. Undoubtedly, Sarah said, thinking of Thornton's cold determination. But you should know something else. Martinez extracted another document. We found this in Edwin Thornton's personal effects from the vault. It appears to be a letter he never sent, addressed to your great-grandfather. The letter, written in the same elegant hand as the confession, expressed remorse for actions taken against Edward Wilson, specifically for claiming his land remained in debt when Thornton had personally accepted the final payment weeks before the market crash. This is as close to a smoking gun as historical documents get, Martinez said quietly. Even the best lawyers will struggle to dispute this evidence. As Sarah left the town hall, the setting sun cast long shadows across Millfield's main street. She drove slowly past the county courthouse with its stately columns, past the first Millfield Bank where it all began, past storefronts and homes whose ownership histories might soon be called into question. Lily was waiting with Eleanor at the salvage yard, perched on the hood of Sarah's truck, animatedly discussing something with the older woman. The sight of them, her daughter and this newfound ally linked by a shared pursuit of truth, brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. Lily jumped down, running to meet her. Eleanor says there might be more secrets in the salvage yard. She says Uncle Jack and her dad built a special hiding place for important papers, not just the vault. Sarah looked questioningly at Eleanor, who nodded. I thought you might want this, the older woman said, holding out a small wooden box. My father kept it all these years, said it shouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Inside the box was a small brass plate identical to the one on the crane's control panel, the keyhole that had activated the hidden compartment. There are more secrets in that salvage yard, Eleanor explained. Your uncle found some, but not all. My father helped hide more than just the vault that night. More valuables? Sarah asked. Eleanor smiled enigmatically. Different kind of valuable. Records that certain powerful families would rather stayed buried. Records of who really controlled this county, who profited from others' misfortune, who betrayed their neighbors during the hardest times. Sarah turned the brass plate over in her hands. Why give this to me? Because you chose justice over personal gain, Eleanor said simply. Because you honored your uncle's search for truth, even when it would have been easier to take the money and walk away. The next morning, Sarah, Lily, and Eleanor returned to the north corner of the salvage yard. The excavation site had been properly secured now, the vault removed to a facility for preservation and study. Eleanor led them to a spot near the base of the crane. Your uncle and my father built a second hiding place, she explained. Not for valuables, but for information. Sarah examined the ground, which looked perfectly ordinary. How do we find it? Eleanor pointed to a small, inconspicuous metal plate embedded in one of the crane's support struts. That's where this goes. Sarah inserted the brass plate into the matching slot and turned it clockwise. There was a soft mechanical click, and a section of ground about 3 feet square shifted slightly. Working together, they lifted what turned out to be a camouflage trapdoor, revealing concrete steps descending into darkness. Stay behind me, Sarah instructed Lily, switching on her flashlight and leading the way down. The underground chamber was small but well constructed, with reinforced walls and a ventilation system that had kept the contents remarkably well preserved. Metal shelving lined the walls, holding dozens of document boxes, each meticulously labeled with dates spanning from the 1920s through the early 1980s. Uncle Jack's archive, Sarah whispered, running her fingers along the dusty boxes. And my father's before him, Eleanor added. They worked together to preserve the truth about how this town really operated, who made decisions, who benefited, who suffered. Lily had already begun examining the nearest box, carefully lifting out yellowed newspaper clippings and photographs. Mom, look at these. They're pictures of secret meetings. The box contained documentation of gatherings where the town's wealthiest families, the Thorntons, Prestons, Caldwells, and Hatfields, coordinated business activities, fixed prices, and determined which families would receive loans and which would be denied. Other boxes held property records showing how land was systematically concentrated in a few hands, correspondence revealing manipulation of local elections, and evidence of coordinated efforts to prevent certain families from economic advancement. This isn't just about the Thorntons, Sarah realized, flipping through a folder of handwritten minutes from a 1956 Business Leaders Council meeting. It's about an entire system. That's why it was hidden separately from the vault, Eleanor confirmed. The vault would prove one crime, theft and fraud. These records document decades of coordination to maintain power and privilege. Like an invisible government, Lily said, displaying a wisdom beyond her years. They spent the entire day cataloging the contents, amazed at the comprehensive nature of the archive. Jack Wilson and William Hargrove had methodically documented the hidden power structure of Millfield County for over 50 years. This changes our approach, Sarah said as they finally emerged into the fading daylight. We need to protect these records and use them strategically. It's not just about uncovering our land now, it's about transforming how this town operates. 3 months later, Sarah stood on a stepladder in her kitchen, paintbrush in hand, transforming the once dingy ceiling with a coat of crisp white paint. The radio on the counter played a local news station, the announcer's voice providing the latest update on what locals now simply called the vault. 3 months after the discovery of the Depression-era bank vault at Wilson's salvage yard, legal proceedings continue to reshape property ownership throughout Millfield County. The state-appointed special commission has validated 17 claims so far, with dozens more under review. First Millfield Bank, still controlled by the Thornton family, faces multiple lawsuits and a federal investigation into historical banking practices. Lily, perched on the counter despite Sarah's repeated warnings about proper kitchen safety, dipped her brush into a can of pale yellow paint and carefully applied it to the wooden cabinet doors. At 11, she took immense pride in being trusted with such grown-up work. A streak of yellow adorned her left cheek, matching the splatter pattern on her overalls. "Mom, they're talking about us again." Lily pointed to the radio with her paintbrush, sending tiny yellow droplets across the kitchen. "We're famous!" Sarah climbed down from the ladder, stretching her aching shoulders. The house felt different lately. Still the same creaking farmhouse where 4 generations of Wilsons had lived, but somehow lighter, as if a shadow had lifted. Famous isn't exactly the word I'd use. Notorious, maybe. The attention had been overwhelming. Journalists camped at their property line for weeks. Distant relatives surfaced with congratulatory calls that inevitably turned to questions about potential inheritance. University historians requested interviews about family records. Even Hollywood producers had called, pitching movie rights to their story. Through it all, Sarah had maintained a careful normalcy for Lily's sake. School, chores, regular bedtimes, while navigating the legal labyrinth triggered by the vault's discovery. The foreclosure notices had stopped, at least temporarily. The bank wouldn't dare proceed while their own historical lending practices were under federal scrutiny. A knock at the door interrupted their painting session. Sarah wiped her hands, wondering if it was another reporter ignoring her "no trespassing" signs. Instead, she found Investigator Martinez on the porch, her normally crisp suit looking slightly rumpled, dark circles under her eyes suggesting long hours. "Ms. Wilson, sorry to drop by unannounced. I was hoping to update you on some developments." Martinez carried a leather portfolio similar to the one from their last meeting, but thicker with documents. Sarah invited her in, conscious of the half-painted kitchen and their disheveled appearance. "We're in the middle of some renovations. Nothing fancy, just freshening things up." Martinez smiled at Lily, who was attempting to wipe yellow paint from her face but mostly succeeding in spreading it further. "Sometimes a fresh coat of paint helps us see old spaces in new ways." They settled at the kitchen table, pushing aside paint cans and brushes. Martinez opened her portfolio, revealing neatly organized documents with color-coded tabs. "I wanted you to hear this from me before it hits the news cycle. We've completed authentication of the original Wilson Farm deed and loan documents. The Federal Commission has ruled unanimously in your favor regarding the eastern parcels." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as Martinez slid a legal document across the table. "This preliminary judgment confirms your family's right to reclaim the 150 acres that were improperly foreclosed upon. Once finalized, Thornton Agricultural Holdings will be required to surrender the property within 90 days." The formality of the language couldn't disguise the magnitude of what it represented. Land her father had dreamed of reclaiming, that her grandfather had lost, would return to Wilson hands. They won't accept this without a fight, Sarah said, scanning the dense legal text. They're already appealing, Martinez confirmed. Their lawyers have filed motions questioning the admissibility of century-old documents as evidence. But with Edwin Thornton's written confession and the clear paper trail, their position is weak. This could still take months to fully resolve, but I wanted you to know the commission considers your claim among the strongest. Lily, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean we'll have the biggest farm in the county again? Martinez smiled. It would certainly be one of the larger family-owned operations. 300 acres is substantial these days, when most small farms have been absorbed by corporate agriculture. We could grow more than just corn and soybeans. Lily's eyes lit with possibilities. Dad always talked about wanting to plant apple orchards before he died. Sarah felt a pang at the mention of her late husband, gone 6 years now from a farming accident that still haunted her dreams. He would have been amazed by these developments, would have seen possibilities she couldn't yet envision. Martinez gathered her papers, moving toward practical matters. There's something else. Thornton representatives have been approaching other claimants privately, offering settlements if they'll drop their cases. It's a divide-and-conquer strategy. Settle the smaller claims, isolate the larger ones. Has anyone accepted? Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. 3 families so far. I can't blame them. Immediate cash versus years of uncertain litigation is a difficult choice for people who've struggled financially for generations. Martinez's expression remained neutral, but Sarah detected a note of disappointment. The Washingtons were approached yesterday. They refused. And me? No private settlement offer? Sarah tried to keep her tone light, though the question mattered more than she wanted to admit. I suspect Mr. Thornton knows better after your previous rejection. But prepare yourself. The tactics will likely escalate before this is over. Martinez stood to leave, her portfolio tucked under her arm. I've seen how these cases unfold. When money fails, pressure increases. Be careful, Ms. Wilson. After Martinez left, Sarah stood at the kitchen window, staring out at fields that had been in her family for generations, and beyond them to the eastern parcels that might soon return to Wilson ownership. The land looked peaceful in the afternoon sun, giving no indication of the human drama playing out across its acres. Can we finish painting later? Lily asked, already reaching for her jacket. I want to go see the secret room again. The secret room was Lily's name for the underground chamber they'd discovered beneath the salvage yard using Eleanor's brass plate, the second hidden treasure her uncle had protected. While the vault's discovery had captured public attention, they'd kept the existence of this historical archive quiet, sharing it only with the special commission and trusted allies. Let me wash up first, Sarah agreed, knowing that revisiting the salvage yard helped Lily process the ongoing changes in their lives. The property had become a touchstone, a place where truth had literally emerged from the ground. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the salvage yard, now transformed from neglected junkyard to active historical site. University researchers cataloged the mountains of metal, finding unexpected treasures amid the rust. The excavation pit had been properly shored up and protected with a permanent canopy, the vault itself removed to a secure facility for preservation and study. Eleanor Hargrove sat in a folding chair near the office, consulting with a young historian from the State University. At 74, she had become the unofficial historical consultant for the project, her lifetime of carrying family stories finally validated. Didn't expect to see you two today, Eleanor greeted them, her eyes crinkling with pleasure. Thought you were painting. We needed a break, Sarah explained, noticing how Lily was already edging toward the north corner, eager to visit their secret discovery. And someone couldn't wait another day to check on the archives. Smart girl, Eleanor nodded approvingly. Those who control information control the narrative. That's why your uncle and my father preserved those records, so the truth couldn't be buried again. They made their way to the north corner, ensuring they weren't followed or observed. The entrance to the underground chamber remained cleverly disguised, a trapdoor that blended perfectly with the surrounding ground when closed. Sarah inserted the brass plate into its hidden socket near the crane's base, turning it clockwise until they heard the satisfying click of machinery engaging. The trap door swung upward, revealing concrete steps leading down into darkness. Sarah switched on her flashlight, illuminating the small underground room they discovered shortly after the vault was opened. Unlike the vault, designed to store valuables, this chamber had been built to preserve information. Its walls lined with metal shelving, holding dozens of document boxes, each meticulously labeled with dates spanning from the 1920s through the early 1980s. "I've been organizing them by family," Lily announced proudly, leading the way to a section she'd arranged herself. "The Thorntons have the most boxes, but there's stuff about all the big families. The Prestons, the Caldwells, the Hatfields. Uncle Jack kept newspaper clippings, photographs, letters, everything that showed how they really ran things. The archive was comprehensive, evidence of coordinated efforts to control local politics, manipulate land values, sideline economic competition, and maintain social hierarchies across generations. Meeting minutes from secret gatherings where prices were fixed and elections influenced. Correspondence revealing how certain families ensured their children received preferential treatment in everything from college admissions to bank loans. Photographs documenting handshake deals that determined which businesses would thrive and which would mysteriously encounter regulatory problems. "Mom, look at this." Lily had opened a box labeled Wilson Personal. Inside were letters between Sarah's grandfather and Uncle Jack, dating back to when they were young men. They were planning to expand the farm together before Uncle Jack went to Vietnam. Grandpa was going to handle the farming, and Uncle Jack would run the salvage business. Sarah gently took the yellowed pages, reading her grandfather's neat handwriting. "Once we get the East Field drainage fixed, we'll have the best corn yield in the county. Dad would be proud to see us working together like this. The Wilson brothers are going to put Millfield on the map." The casual optimism pierced Sarah's heart. Two young men with no idea how war, family conflict, and buried secrets would alter their paths. Her grandfather and uncle had eventually become estranged, their shared dreams abandoned. And now, decades later, she and Lily were unearthing not just historical injustices, but personal family tragedies. "Why did they stop being friends?" Lily asked, sensing the emotion behind Sarah's silence. "Vietnam changed Uncle Jack. And then when he started investigating the vault, I think Grandpa was scared of what would happen if they challenged the Thorntons. He wanted to protect the family. By letting the bad guys win?" Lily's face scrunched in confusion. "It's not always about winning, Lily. Sometimes it's about surviving until the right time comes to fight." Sarah carefully replaced the letters in their box. Grandpa chose one path, Uncle Jack another. Neither was entirely right or wrong. They spent another hour sorting through documents, identifying materials that might strengthen various families' claims. The Historical Commission had begun the painstaking process of digitizing everything, ensuring the records couldn't disappear again. But Sarah insisted on maintaining control of the originals. Evening approached as they climbed back to the surface, securing the trapdoor behind them. The salvage yard looked different in the fading light, less a jumble of junk, more a repository of potential. Sarah had begun working with historical preservationists to develop a plan for the property, seeing possibilities beyond its scrap value. Halfway to their truck, Sarah noticed a familiar black SUV parked near the entrance. Richard Thornton leaned against its hood, arms crossed, watching their approach with a neutral expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Wait here," Sarah instructed Lily, who for once didn't argue. "Ms. Wilson," Thornton straightened as she approached. "I was hoping we might have a word." "I have nothing to say that my lawyers haven't already communicated." Sarah kept her distance, intentionally stopping several feet away. The last 3 months had taught her caution. "This isn't about legal matters, at least not directly." Thornton's expression softened slightly, revealing unexpected fatigue in the lines around his eyes. "I wanted to speak with you person to person, without attorneys or investigators present." "About what?" "My son, James. He's in his final year at Yale." A note of pride crept into Thornton's voice. "When this story broke nationally, he called me. Do you know what he asked? He asked if it was true. If our family fortune was built on stolen land and falsified debts." Sarah remained silent, watching Thornton's facade crack slightly, revealing something more human beneath the banker's polished exterior. I've spent my life believing in a family legacy of business acumen and financial wisdom. I told myself we earned our position through hard work and strategic thinking. Thornton's gaze drifted toward the excavation site where his ancestors' crimes had been unearthed. When confronted with evidence to the contrary, my first instinct was to suppress it, to protect that narrative at all costs. And now, Sarah prompted when he fell silent, now I'm trying to ensure my son has a family name he can bear without shame. Thornton extracted a folder from inside his jacket and extended it toward her. This proposal includes full restoration of all documented wrongfully acquired properties, financial compensation for lost income over generations, and establishment of a community oversight board for the bank moving forward. Sarah hesitated before accepting the folder. Inside were detailed documents outlining a comprehensive settlement offer, $50 million to establish a community restoration fund, transfer of disputed lands back to original family ownership, creation of educational trusts for descendants of affected families, and restructuring of First Millfield Bank's governance to include community representation. The terms were surprisingly generous, far beyond what courts would likely mandate. Why bring this to me first? I'm not a lawyer or a community representative. Because none of this would be happening without your actions, Thornton admitted reluctantly. When you refused my offer that day, chose justice over immediate financial gain, it forced a reckoning that might otherwise have been buried for another generation. The community will listen to your assessment of this proposal. Sarah closed the folder thoughtfully. I'll need time to review this with the others. We'll need guarantees, independent verification, community involvement in implementation. All reasonable requests, Thornton agreed, rising to leave. At the driver's door of his SUV, he paused. One more thing. Your uncle's salvage yard. I'd like to purchase it at fair market value. Not for the land, but to preserve what's there, convert it into a historical site documenting this chapter of Millfield's history. The salvage yard isn't for sale, Sarah replied automatically. Thornton nodded as if expecting this response. Consider it part of your uncle's legacy, a place where future generations can learn about how one man's persistence ultimately changed the course of an entire community. Think about it. As his SUV disappeared down the driveway, Sarah remained rooted in place, turning over Thornton's unexpected proposal in her mind. Was this genuine atonement or sophisticated damage control? Perhaps elements of both. Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Michael Ramirez's pickup truck, Eleanor in the passenger seat. They had planned to examine additional documents from the underground archive that evening. Was that Richard Thornton I passed on the road? Michael asked incredulously as they joined Sarah. She nodded, summarizing Thornton's unexpected proposal and sharing the documents he'd left. It's comprehensive, more than I expected. Whether it's sincere is another question. Interesting timing, Eleanor observed after reviewing the papers. The State Banking Commission begins its formal investigation next week. Federal prosecutors have been interviewing former bank employees. This proposal would effectively settle matters before those investigations can determine criminal liability. Clever, Michael agreed, but also potentially beneficial for the community. Immediate compensation rather than years of uncertain legal battles. Property restoration guaranteed rather than subject to continued appeals. We should bring this to everyone at tonight's meeting, Sarah decided. This affects the whole community, not just us. By sunset, they had gathered at the salvage yard office, which had become an unofficial headquarters for what locals now called the Vault Recovery Committee. Representatives from 24 affected families crowded into the space, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and cautious hope as Sarah presented Thornton's proposal. It's a starting point for negotiation, she concluded, better terms than we might get through continued litigation, but with fewer opportunities for full accountability. Debate erupted immediately, passionate arguments for acceptance countered by equally fervent calls for pursuing justice through the courts. Some distrusted any offer from a Thornton on principle. Others saw practical benefits in resolving matters quickly. In the midst of the heated discussion, Lily slipped outside for fresh air. Sarah, noticing her daughter's absence, excused herself to check on her. She found Lily sitting on the hood of their truck, staring up at the emerging stars. "Too loud in there?" Sarah asked, climbing up beside her. "Too angry," Lily corrected. "Everyone's talking about money and land, but they're still mad. Will getting stuff back make them not mad anymore?" The question cut to the heart of something Sarah had been pondering herself. I don't know, honey. Justice isn't just about getting back what was taken. It's about healing what was broken. Like painting our kitchen, Lily mused. We're not just covering up the old color. We're making it new again. Sarah pulled her daughter close, grateful for the simple wisdom children sometimes offered adults tangled in complexities. Their moment of peace was shattered by the sound of breaking glass from the direction of the office. They turned to see a figure dart around the corner of the building, too quickly to identify. Shouts erupted from inside, followed by people streaming out the door. Stay here, Sarah ordered, rushing toward the commotion. Inside, she found the office window smashed, a brick lying amid scattered glass on the floor. Wrapped around the brick was a paper with a simple message: drop the claims or lose everything. The meeting disbanded early, the threat casting a shadow over their discussions. Sarah drove home with Lily in uneasy silence, checking her rearview mirror more often than usual. The brick was a crude tactic, but effective in its way, a reminder that not everyone welcomed the upheaval of long-established power structures. That night, after Lily was asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table reviewing Thornton's settlement proposal in detail. The terms were more generous than she'd initially realized, addressing not just financial restitution, but structural reforms to prevent similar abuses in the future. If sincere, it represented an extraordinary opportunity for community healing. A soft knock at the back door startled her. Sarah approached cautiously, baseball bat in hand, a habit she'd developed since the vault's discovery had made her a public figure. Through the window, she recognized Miguel Ramirez's silhouette and opened the door with relief. Sorry to come by so late, Miguel glanced nervously over his shoulder. Dad sent me. Someone broke into our house this afternoon while we were at the meeting. Sarah's grip tightened on the bat. Was anything taken? Just the documents from the vault, copies of our family's loan papers and property deeds. Nothing else was touched, not even the TV or Mom's jewelry. Miguel's expression hardened. They're trying to eliminate evidence. The originals are secure with the commission, Sarah reassured him, and everything's been digitized. It's not about the documents themselves, Miguel countered. It's about intimidation, the break-in, the brick, their messages. See what we can do if you continue. 3 other families called Dad after the meeting. Their homes were searched too. A chill ran through Sarah that had nothing to do with the night air. Have you reported this to Martinez? Dad's calling her now, but we wanted to warn you directly. Your farm might be next. You have the strongest claim, and you've been the most visible leader. After Miguel left, Sarah checked every window and door, then sat vigil in the living room, bat across her knees. Sleep was impossible. Her mind raced through scenarios, calculating risks and responses. The threat felt different now. Not abstract, but immediate. Not aimed at property, but potentially at Lily. By morning, her resolve had hardened. She called Eleanor and arranged to meet at the salvage yard, bringing Lily with her rather than leaving her alone at the farm. The community needed a united response to these intimidation tactics. They arrived to find the salvage yard gate unlocked. Strange, since Sarah distinctly remembered securing it the previous evening. Inside, everything appeared normal until they reached the north corner. The hidden entrance to the underground archive stood open, the trapdoor wrenched from its hinges. Stay in the truck, Sarah instructed Lily, who for once didn't protest. With Eleanor at her side, Sarah descended the damaged stairs. The underground room had been systematically ransacked. Document boxes emptied onto the floor, papers scattered, some apparently burned in small piles that had thankfully extinguished before spreading. Decades of carefully preserved evidence lay in chaotic heaps. They were looking for something specific, Eleanor dealt to examine the scattered documents. Not just random destruction. They sorted through everything first, then burned selected papers. Sarah noticed a pattern in the damage. The Thornton boxes got the worst of it. And look, the Wilson-Thornton correspondence is completely gone. The letter from Edwin Thornton to your great-grandfather, Eleanor realized, the one expressing remorse for falsifying debt records. It was here in our backup copies. Fortunately, the originals are with the commission, Sarah reminded her, and Martinez has everything digitized. Eleanor shook her head grimly. They're erasing history again. Just like in 20, first the vault, now these records. Some things never change. They were surveying the damage when Michael Ramirez arrived with troubling news. The commission office was broken into last night. Security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. They're still assessing what's missing. The pattern was clear: a coordinated effort to eliminate evidence and intimidate claimants. Sarah called investigator Martinez, who arrived within the hour, her expression grim as she documented the destruction. This goes beyond Thornton, Martinez concluded, photographing the damaged archives. He may be sincere in his settlement offer, but others have more to lose if these records have become public. The Prestons, the Caldwells, the Hatfields, all implicated in decades of manipulation. Thornton's just the most visible target. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, watching as Martinez's team carefully collected scattered documents for preservation. "Accelerate digitization, distribute copies widely so there's no single point of failure, and consider accepting Thornton's offer, with modifications to include the broader network of families implicated in these records." News of the break-ins spread quickly through the community. By afternoon, the salvage yard had become an impromptu gathering point for affected families, their collective anger hardening into determination. If intimidation was meant to silence them, it had achieved the opposite. Maria Chen, whose family had lost their grocery store during the Depression due to vanished loan records, captured the mood. "They took our property once with false papers. They won't erase our history again with bricks and threats." Sarah found herself reluctantly thrust into a leadership role, her initial discovery of the vault making her a natural focal point for the community's response. As twilight approached, she addressed the gathered crowd from the steps of the salvage yard office. "What we're experiencing now, the threats, the break-ins, the destruction, these aren't new tactics. They're the same methods used for generations to maintain power and silence opposition." Sarah gestured toward the excavation site where the vault had been discovered. "But this time is different. This time we have evidence that can't be buried again. This time we stand together." She outlined a plan, accepting Thornton's settlement offer as a framework, but expanding it to address the broader network of historical injustices, creating a community trust to manage recovered assets, establishing the salvage yard as a permanent historical center documenting Millfield's true development. Thornton's offer provides financial restitution, but money alone doesn't heal generational wounds, Sarah concluded. True reconciliation requires acknowledging the full truth, not just about one family, but about the entire system they represented. The community voted overwhelmingly to proceed with modified settlement negotiations. Martinez would represent their interests to ensure legal protections were ironclad. The intimidation attempts had backfired, solidifying their resolve instead of weakening it. As the meeting disbanded, Richard Thornton's SUV pulled into the salvage yard. The crowd parted silently as he approached, their expressions ranging from outright hostility to cautious neutrality. Sarah met him halfway, neither retreating nor advancing. "I heard about the break-ins," Thornton's voice carried in the evening stillness. "I had nothing to do with them." "I believe you," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the realization that she did. "But others in your circle may have different ideas about protecting the status quo." Thornton surveyed the gathering, clearly measuring the community's solidarity. "The settlement offer still stands. $50 million for the restoration fund, return of all disputed properties, community oversight of the bank." "We'll need more," Sarah held his gaze steadily. "The underground archives your associates tried to destroy implicate more than just your family. The Prestons, the Caldwells, the Hatfields, all participated in systematic control of this community for generations. Our counter-proposal will address that broader network." "That's beyond my authority to negotiate," Thornton frowned. "Then expand your negotiating team," Sarah countered. "This isn't just about making peace with the Wilson family or compensating vault claimants. It's about transforming how Millfield operates going forward." As if to punctuate her point, Lily emerged from the crowd carrying a document box salvaged from the ransacked archive. "This one has pictures of all the secret meeting," she announced, too young to fully grasp the significance of her timing, "where they decided which businesses would get loans and which ones wouldn't." Thornton's gaze shifted between Sarah and Lily, then to the assembled community members watching the exchange. Something in his expression changed, a calculation recalibrated, a reality accepted. I'll consult with the other families, he conceded, but understand that broadening the scope will complicate and potentially delay resolution. Justice rarely arrives on a convenient schedule, Sarah replied. We've waited nearly a century. We can wait a little longer to get it right. As Thornton departed, Michael approached Sarah with reluctant admiration. You just expanded a multi-million-dollar negotiation into potentially the largest community settlement in state history. Those other families won't come to the table willingly. They will when they understand the alternative. Sarah nodded toward the salvage yard office, where Martinez was coordinating the digital preservation of remaining archives. Full public disclosure of everything in those records. Every backroom deal, every manipulated election, every preferential contract. Sunlight is a powerful motivator. Over the following weeks, the threats ceased as abruptly as they had begun. Whether due to increased security measures, public scrutiny, or back-channel warnings from Thornton to his associates, the intimidation campaign disappeared. Settlement negotiations expanded to include representatives from all the major families implicated in the historical records, their initial resistance giving way to pragmatic acceptance as the extent of documented evidence became clear. Sarah divided her time between the farm, the salvage yard, and endless meetings with attorneys, historians, and community organizers. The kitchen renovation remained half-finished, yellow cabinet doors contrasting with still white upper sections, a visible reminder of how life had been suspended in the aftermath of the vault's discovery. 6 months after unearthing the vault, the Millfield Historical Commission released its first comprehensive report, methodically documenting how a small group of families had engineered the town's development for their own benefit across generations. The report wasn't simply an indictment of past wrongs, but a blueprint for structural reform, addressing banking practices, land use policies, municipal contracting, and educational access. National media returned to Millfield, framing the community's response as a model for addressing historical injustices in rural America. Academic researchers arrived to study what they termed reconciliation through documentation, the process by which buried truths, once exposed, could transform entrenched power dynamics. For Sarah, the theoretical discussions meant less than the practical outcomes gradually materializing. The eastern parcels of the Wilson farm were officially returned through court order, the first of many property restorations anticipated under the settlement framework. Federal banking regulators implemented special oversight of First Millfield Bank, with community representatives serving on a newly established ethics board. Most significantly, plans developed for the Millfield Agricultural Education Center, a collaborative initiative to be built on restored Wilson land, providing training and resources for small farmers competing against corporate agriculture. The center would combine traditional farming knowledge with sustainable practices, creating pathways for future generations to maintain connection with the land. 1 year after finding the brass key beneath her uncle's office floorboard, Sarah stood at the edge of her expanded farmland, watching as community members gathered for the groundbreaking ceremony. The Wilson farm, nearly lost to foreclosure, had become a symbol of resilience and renewal. Lily had insisted on wearing her best dress for the occasion, though she'd compromised by keeping her favorite mud boots underneath. At 11, she navigated the boundary between childhood and adolescence with the same determination she brought to everything, sometimes maddeningly stubborn, always fiercely loyal to her principles. Eleanor joined them, leaning more heavily on her cane these days, but still sharp-eyed and determined. Your uncle would be proud, she observed, gazing across the assembled crowd. Not just of finding the vault, but of what you've helped build afterward. I was ready to sell everything and walk away, Sarah admitted. If I hadn't found that key, someone would have eventually, Eleanor replied. Truth has a way of surfacing, given enough time. The question is always whether we're ready to receive it when it does. Richard Thornton arrived with his son James, now graduated from Yale, and working with the Community Foundation established under the settlement agreement. Their presence still created undercurrents of tension, but increasingly they were seen as participants in the reconciliation process rather than simply antagonists. As the ceremonial groundbreaking commenced, Sarah found herself standing beside Thornton, both holding commemorative shovels to be used for the symbolic first turning of soil. My father would be horrified by all this, Thornton remarked quietly. sharing power, acknowledging wrongdoing, partnering with the Wilson family. My father might have been too, Sarah acknowledged. He chose silence to protect what he had rather than risking everything for what was right. And you chose differently, Thornton observed. I had better options. Sarah watched as Lily chatted animatedly with James Thornton, the younger generation seemingly less burdened by historical divisions, and a daughter who wouldn't let me take the easy path. After the ceremony, Sarah returned to the salvage yard office, now designated as a historical landmark preserved exactly as her uncle had left it. His meticulous notes, collections of curiosities, and hand-drawn maps were understood now not as the work of an eccentric obsessive, but of a patient truth-seeker. On the desk sat a framed photograph of her uncle and father as young men, arms around each other's shoulders, standing proudly before the salvage yard entrance. Before the estrangement, before fear and protection drove them apart. Two brothers who had chosen different paths in response to the same buried truths, one to confront, one to avoid. Sarah touched the frame gently, grateful for the unexpected inheritance that had connected her not just to her family's past, but to its purpose. The brass key that had started everything now hung on a simple chain around Lily's neck, her 11th birthday present, and a reminder that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come disguised as burdens we initially resist. The path forward remained challenging, full of difficult conversations and uncomfortable reckonings. But it was a path illuminated by truth finally brought into the light, by justice delayed, but not ultimately denied. The journey that had begun with a reluctant signature on inheritance papers had transformed into something far bigger than one woman's struggle to save her family farm. It had become about a community reclaiming its history, challenging entrenched power, and daring to imagine a more equitable future. And it had all started with a single brass key hidden beneath the floorboards of a dusty salvage yard office, waiting for someone with the courage to turn it.